Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord. Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord.
Welcome to The Notice, where together we notice the mercy of God. I'm Susan Hoekstra, your host. On this episode of The Notice, human beings are story-shaped creatures. We are born into stories, raised in stories, and live again in stories. So what do you think of a story? Is it a simple account of events from your life? Join me and my friend Julie Eickenroth, director of Freedom Farm Ministries, for the first of a couple of episodes on story, our theme for the year. Our story, other stories, and his story, and how God takes notice. Well, Julie, welcome again to The Notice.
Thanks, it's nice to be back.
My
It's
frequent-
2026 now.
frequent flyer. I'm so glad that you're here. We always have a great discussion. As I was preparing for this episode, I recognize that the subject of story is complex. So when we talk about story in lots of ways, so listeners, I know we can't cover everything there is to know. But I wanted to introduce to you that the importance we place on story here at Maple Ridge Place. One of the best ways we can take notice of someone is to listen to their story. I think it's more than just a list of events. Someone's story is significant because it gives meaning to who they are and why they are the way they are. Julie is an arts professional and incorporates what they call the arts story framework in a lot of her offerings. So Julie, tell me just a little bit about why you think story is important, and maybe talk about the arts professional and what that looks like.
Well, Susan, story is how we process our life experiences. I mean, think about any time you tell somebody what happened to you or what the context of your life is or what your family was like or what your school years were like. You're always telling stories, right? We listen to each other's stories. I mean, every people group or culture has a storytelling tradition, right? There are oral traditions that get passed down from generation to generation, and they provide a thread of connection to the previous generation and going forward to the next generation. And it's simply the way we process our life experiences. We think in terms of story. We're not just a bundle of dry facts, but we have characters, we have timelines, we have locations, we have themes, we have premises. Think about a book. What is the premise of a book? Or what is, not every story starts at the beginning and goes to the end. Some stories start in the middle and jump to the flashback to the past and fast forward to the future. And so it's just stories is how we think and breathe and process our lives. And you asked about Arch. Arch is a professional organization for therapists and coaches and educators and all kinds of people who are people helpers. Arch just basically stands for Arenas for Change. And what that means is that we use all kinds of arenas to help people tell their stories. For us personally and for many in the Arch organization, we use horses. We have a small therapeutic herd here at Maple Ridge Place at Freedom Farm. We use nature. So there's all kinds of settings, but you can help people tell their stories by looking at pictures or doing a Zoom conversation, because it's really just about helping facilitate people telling their stories and finding a pathway to transformation.
Well, the Arch story framework is, I was reading about this a little bit, and it's structured, but it's emotionally safe approach for personal growth and healing. And it's used in therapeutic settings, like you said. And it's a system that helps clients and facilitators see life's challenges as kind of like these narrative arcs, like as a story. So what happens when we tell our story? And what happens when others listen?
Well, I mean, sometimes we're stuck in our stories. Sometimes we we have a story bubbling in there, but we're stuck in what we call the messy middle or the messy muddle. If you think of sort of when we say arch, or you think of an arc, the story arc. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's all kinds of chapters in between, there's plot twists and changes and characters that come and go. And so the arch story framework uses the structure of story to help people find their story in a way that is emotionally safe. You mentioned that before. So if I was going to help a person, we might say, who are the main characters in your life? What is a common theme, or what are you dealing with right now? And we might pull the elements of story out with that person and help them to get some perspective on their story by using the elements of story. I'm not sure if that's answering your question.
It is. I wonder, too, is this a fiction story or a nonfiction story? Or maybe a little of both, because the arch theme or motto is when our stories change, we change.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, everyone's story is important. Everyone's story has facts and people and history, but sometimes we overlay themes on our stories that may or may not be the truth. In other words, we might have attached a meaning to something that happened in our life, and our response to that event and the story we attach to it helps us in the moment, but maybe as we go along in life, the story we've overlaid on that event gets us stuck. It doesn't work for us anymore. So using the story framework allows the people that we help to look at their story with fresh eyes and maybe find a different pathway to let go of an old story. Who am I? What does this mean? What did this incident in my life mean? Who does that say I am? And it allows them maybe to find a different pathway to transform their story. Like you said, my favorite saying in Arch is, when our stories change, we change. So the Arch story framework allows people to look at their stories with some objectivity or some emotional distance, some safety, and find a different pathway to find transformation and change in their story.
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes with my clients, I'll talk about what I call the fish story. Mm-hmm. And the fish story is when you first catch the fish and you tell people the story, it's 10 inches long, and then the next thing you know, it's 12 inches
longer.
long and 13 inches long.
Yeah.
So are we talking about that kind of change, Julie? And when we change, could it be? I mean, sometimes are we exaggerating, or we're thinking something is that what changes?
Well, there's the facts of a story, right? There's the facts of what happened. And then there's the narrative we attach to that story. What did it mean? What does it mean when I think about myself, or when I think about God, or when I think about my parents, or when I think about my family of origin? Or what does it mean where I am in life and how I show up in life? And so, like I said, sometimes those narratives that we attach to the things that have happened to us, they feel real, but then eventually they may not be working for us anymore. So it requires us to kind of look at our story again and say, maybe there's something different there that's more real,
and I also,
than this narrative.
Like, when my father died at age 10,
mm-hmm.
Okay, I was 10, but my brothers were 12, 13, and 14, and then, of course, there was my mom. Same event, but we all have a different story about it.
For sure.
And sometimes it has been very helpful. I'm still discovering some of what happened with my brothers. When I see them, they'll tell me something about that story that I didn't know. And so it kind of, because I knew their part of the story, mm-hmm. it changed my story. Mm-hmm. It changed how I looked at it, too. Mm-hmm. So there's value in not only telling our story and getting better at telling the story, but also listening to others' stories
mm-hmm.
as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think so many times we're kind of caught up in our own story, and we maybe aren't accustomed to listening to story, to other people's stories. In my Arch story groups, I talk about the skills to learn to listen deeply, deep listening, to listen to another person's story with curiosity rather than judgment. To not be superimposing my story over another person's story and kind of hijacking their story, but being able to listen with empathy and with compassion and with, like I said, with curiosity rather than with judgment. And so, there's so much contention in our life today. And a lot of what is happening with the division and stuff in this country and all around the world with people is people are kind of projecting their own stories and their own narratives on other people and not really listening. Right? Not really listening from the heart, not really listening except to interrupt or to project our own understanding of things. And it's really hard sometimes to learn how to listen because we feel defensive or we feel indignant about something, and we think I think human beings naturally think when they believe something, it's right. And so it's kind of hard to let go of that. And that's sort of an entitlement of, if I believe it, it's true. And so that's why I think it's good to look at story and to listen to other people's story. When we listen to story in our art story groups, it's so profoundly moving. And to hear the things that have impacted other people's lives. I mean, sometimes we'll all sit there with tears in our eyes because somebody has shared something so deep and so profound and so personal, and they've been courageous to share it. And it feels like an honor. It feels like an honor to hear their story and to sit with them in that space, And then, of course, we sometimes will go down to the horses. Or we'll go out on the farm and we'll tell them, I'll say, go and find your story in nature. Because nature has all kinds of things there that help us look at our story with fresh eyes. Whether you're up on the hill and seeing the farm from that perspective, of you're walking the path or around the farm, or going through the gardens, or walking the horse's path, or interacting with a horse, or with Missy, our dog. Sometimes those simple things, a person can just have an aha moment. We call it in Arch, we call it the Arch moment.
Okay.
A moment of revelation, and sometimes it's not always a perfect or wonderful revelation. Sometimes it's like a oh crap moment, and I've got to let go of this thing or whatever. But those simple things really help people see their story through fresh eyes, and the fresh eyes often then gives them a moment of hope. Like my story can be different than the one I'm swamped in right now, right?
And it's also their story matters.
Absolutely, people's story matters.
I'm writing this book right now, and one of the chapters in it is called The Voice. And I'm talking about how people have a voice, and that we need to have a voice. It's part of our makeup. It's part of us. When we inhale so much in life with things that happen, traumas, good things, bad things, everything. We're so overstimulated, and we have to get it out. So telling our story is one way of doing it, and there's creative ways we can do it. We don't have to be locked into doing it in just one particular way. Right. So this is kind of some of the things that happen in your arch groups, which you just got done with one in December, right? So you're starting another one up in February?
Yeah, we're starting one, maybe two in February. And last year we really piloted this program to see how it would work. Because I do the art story framework with my clients one-on-one as well in our work together. But I thought it would be really wonderful to have a small group setting of women listening to each other's stories. And so each week we might do something a little different. We might look at our family of origin. We might look at a poem, writing a certain poem in a certain structure. We might go down and see the horses. We might do something with art. And we bring, usually 1 week early on, we have people bring what we call an artifact. Because the things that we keep around us in our homes are full of stories. Right. Where I got it from, who gave it to me, what does it mean to me? We might have collections of things, all kinds of things that carry and embody a story all around us. And I love that exercise. That's really fun because it's amazing the things that people bring and the stories that are all wrapped up in those artifacts. And sometimes I say, go find an artifact out on the farm, and they might pick up a leaf or find something buried in the ground, and it becomes, or look at a barn door and see a little barn door that represents a door in their life that's opening. That's just really, really fun. And I love that because God is a storyteller.
He is.
He created us this way. He created us to think and process our life experiences this way. And even his Bible is 70% stories. Did you know that? And the very beginning of the Bible starts out with an amazing story. The story of creation, the story of Adam and Eve, the story of the two trees. And then the Bible itself is just full of amazing stories that we can connect with.
And I love that because in the Bible, stories like reveal God's character. Sometimes it provides us a grand narrative, a big narrative of the world, right? It shapes our worldview. We can connect emotionally and intellectually. It makes us things that we can't understand a little bit more grasp.
Well, think about parables.
Stories.
Jesus taught truths in parables. They have symbols. They have metaphors. He taught in language of the people, of the agrarian language, the farmer and fisherman language. He used their language to tell them profound spiritual truths with simple things that they recognized in their everyday life. And
I love how he also illustrates what transformation looks like. The stories in the Bible tell us about transformation. And I think what you're getting at is these art story groups are not just to journal your
Right.
life events. I went to college here, I did this there, whatever.
It's not just a recitation of facts.
Right. It's not. It's more about transformation.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? And how we can be transformed when we tell our stories, and also when we listen to others. I think one of the things that was really cool for me is when I was in the group, we had a woman who was talking about her ethnic heritage. She's Irish, and she had a real connection with that, and it really opened up a part of me, because I'm 100% Polish, folks. That it opened up a part of me, though, because when you hear somebody else's story, it kind of can open something to you. And that's why hearing other people's stories is a gift to us too. And when we tell our story, we're actually gifting ourselves away.
Absolutely. And to tell your story is a bit of a risk. One of the things that's inherent in relationships and us being created as relational beings is that there's risk in every relationship. When you offer your heart, people can reject it or people can judge it or whatever. But if we can provide an atmosphere like we try to do here, which is a therapeutic environment of the beautiful 14-acre property that you and Dick bought at Maple Ridge Place, and we have animals, we have gardens, we have this beautiful place, then hopefully we can offer a safe place where people can vulnerably tell their stories in a way that's appropriate, but in the context of supportive community, and everybody kind of saying, well, I'm going to put my little toe in the water and tell a little bit of my story. And we even put this in our other programs, like we have in the fall we do campfire stories, so it's a place for women to come and tell their stories around the campfire. We do evening meditation at the farm, so that's once a month. People can come, and I say, go find your story in nature, and then they can share about that, what they find when they come back. So it's really just these different venues that allow creative ways for people to open up their stories in a safe community.
And part of that safety is that we do a lot of things that we do around here are smaller in number.
Yes, they are.
On purpose,
On
folks.
purpose, yep. We don't want big throngs of people. We're not going to ever have 200 people roaming around the farm.
and part of it, we do that on purpose because the nature of something small, people feel a little safer. Yeah. People get crazy having to speak in public. Some people just aren't comfortable with that at all. When you're telling your story in a smaller setting with a smaller group of people, you're going to connect. and you're going to bond. I've seen such bonding happen.
I was going to just say that.
It's
to watch these women, and it's not always women, but we are more geared toward working with women, but we work with couples, we work with families. Hopefully we have some children's programs and teen programs this year. But it has been absolutely remarkable to watch. We've done three story groups now, 2 last spring and 1 in this last fall. To watch the bonding that happens with these women has been so beautiful and so powerful. The empathy, the kindness, just the friendship, it's really, really rich and beautiful.
And it lingers too. In other words, it continues. Those relationships continue, especially if they're doing other things around here or they see each other. They connect.
Or remember last year in the spring, the Friday morning group, a bunch of women would go out to lunch afterwards because we would get done around 11:30 or noon, and they go out to lunch. And one time their cars were still parked in our parking lot at 4:00 because they were at a local restaurant, just really bonding and their experience of hanging out together. It was really amazing.
Yeah, and we also had I don't know, maybe it was an arch moment when we had a bunch of us dancing out.
That was the lady who has the Irish heritage, and she began. We were doing a session on the farm, out on the farm, just having people find their story in nature and interacting with the horses. And she was standing outside the gate where the horses were, and she and some other gals were standing around, and she began to sing a song of her Irish heritage. And everybody kind of circled up, and she started doing just a little circle dance with everyone and taught them the song. And I have pictures and video of that moment. It was so powerful.
I cannot actually tell you what was happening in that moment. All I know was something was happening, like we were connecting.
Yeah, it was
beautiful. It was amazing.
Really beautiful. Yeah.
It was beautiful. And of course, I have some of my own arch moments that happen. In fact, we have a tree house on our property
because of that arch moment.
That's not my arch moment. But that's a whole other story for another episode. But Julie, story, of course, is important to God. Our stories are important to God. And we always have these 3 relationships, God, others, and self. So tell me a little bit, how has God noticed you with story?
Oh, lots of different ways, but I can think of one right now when I was in a really bad place with my first marriage. And it was not going well, and it was not going to go well. And my husband was away for the weekend with my children, and I was really in a deep place of prayer and seeking God. And I went to church that morning, Sunday morning, and our pastor shared the story of the woman with the issue of blood. And he was a great teacher, so I was taking copious notes. And then I went back home and kind of climbed back into bed and was praying, and I started looking over those notes, and God opened her story to me. And he said, her story is your story. She had hemorrhaged for 12 years, and I had been married for 12 years. She spent all she had and got no better. She reached out, and heard about this man that was, a healer, and touched the hem of his garment, and then she, was healed, and then he restored her to her community. And God spoke things to me through that story that absolutely, you talk about an arch moment, that was an arch moment on steroids. Sadly, my marriage didn't survive, but I survived. God reawakened me. He healed me. He restored me to community. He gave me hope for my future. And now when I tell that story, and I tell it usually in more detail, but when I look at that story and I tell it, and I just say, thank you, Father. You rescued me. You gave me a way forward through another woman's story from thousands of years ago that got set down in story form in the Bible so that I could have this moment. I could have this arch moment, this moment of transformation. And it changed my story.
Wow.
And when my story changed, I changed.
And when you tell your story, I've changed. Because when I hear your story, and it wants me to notice God more. It makes me want to cling on to him, because if he could connect with you in that intimate of a way through his word, He's the ultimate story.
He is a joyful storyteller, and he is very unabashed. When you look at the Bible's full of stories that are pretty eye-opening and pretty bare and not sugar-coated at all. And so I think, well, if God is willing to have a book that represents him and his story and hopes for humanity, and they're all pretty raw stories, then he's not going to be put off by my raw story.
No, not at all.
He's looking at me with love and kindness, and he has all kinds of hope for me in my story.
So friends, if you're listening today, I just want to offer something to you, and that is, first of all, I want to tell you you have a voice. Your story matters. It's in your story where God takes notice. In 2007, during one of the most painful seasons of my life, I began to understand the quiet power of story. I was hurting and unsure of how to make sense of what I carried inside. In his kindness, God placed a woman in my path who gently encouraged me to begin telling my story. Once a week, we met in a small diner. Simple, unassuming moments that became sacred space. Over time, those conversations helped me uncover childhood trauma I had learned to bury just to survive. While I was still in this fragile process of healing, I discovered that my husband had been involved in multiple affairs. The ground beneath me shifted. I wrestled deeply, searching for peace while coming to terms with the reality that my marriage was not going to survive. It was a season marked with grief, confusion, and heartbreak. Yet, God did not leave me there. He noticed me. Not only did he carry me through, he gently showed me the meaning and redemptive power of story. I remember sharing my experience of sexual abuse at a women's retreat. I'll tell you, it was incredibly difficult, and of course I was afraid. But when the words were finally spoken, something changed. The weight I had been carrying for so long began to lift. I even shared a song that captured pieces of my journey. Telling my story became a turning point. Speaking your story out loud, it helped me acknowledge my pain, allowed myself to truly feel, and begin the process of renewing my mind, which is claiming victory in Jesus. What had once felt vulnerable became something God could meet me in. So friend, if you are walking through a hard season, or maybe your story just hasn't ever been told, I want you to know you are not alone. I invite you to consider joining an Arch Story group or reaching out to meet one of us one-on-one. Please don't hesitate. God sees us in so many quiet, personal ways, and maybe this is just one of the ways he is noticing you, inviting you to take a gentle step towards healing. Reach out. Until next time, take notice.
Or kindness, Lord.